off with a review of Chapter 6, and we're going to be starting Chapter 9. You may say, well, there's a difference between those chapters. We're not covering 7 and 8. I'll cover that. We're going to be cherry-picking content from here on out because it's pretty darned amazing how quickly the semester has gone and how little time we have left together. Just a reminder, guys, that the Chapter 5 assignment is due tonight. If you haven't done it yet, please do it. And we're going to also be making a decision as a group today if we're going to be doing our test 2 on either Monday or Wednesday. We're going to vote on that, guys. Next Friday, however, we're going to have a guest speaker, a gentleman who works for a shipping company in Erie. He's a St. Francis alum and regularly deals with the United Steelworkers. Is going to come to present the management side of the management labor equation. Just like we had the United Mine Workers, this gentleman will be coming in to explain what it has been like in his career to deal with unions. I'll give you more biographical information on him next week. But he graduated with an accounting degree from St. Francis and ended up in management. So his experience learning how to work with labor unions was all trial by fire. So I think he'll give you a pretty interesting perspective. All right, guys. Oh, are you kidding me? Like the activity didn't show up. Oh, all right. Well, we're just going to have to do it by show of hands then, guys. If we had to pick between Monday or Wednesday next week to do the exam, I'm going to give you an option. I want you to raise your hand and tell me which one you prefer. Who would rather do the exam on Monday? Who would rather do the exam on Wednesday? By the numbers, the Wednesday wins. So our exam is going to be next Wednesday. I'll be sending you guys out a study guide, hopefully later today. Guys, from the last exam we had together, was it pretty straightforward? Expect the same. I'm not here to trip you up. I'm not here to punish you. When we cover this stuff today in the review, I'm going to be also inserting a couple open-ended questions. They're pretty indicative of the types of open-ended questions that we would normally have. So our test is going to be on Wednesday. That being said, let's talk about how we're going to go for the rest of the semester. What we're going to be covering, guys, we're going to be starting Chapter 9 today. We're going to be covering Chapters 9 and 10 and possibly Chapter 11. We're going to be doing an online quiz as an assignment, Chapters 7 and 8. For the guys just coming in, the vote has been made. Our exam in this class is going to be next Wednesday for the most recent chapters we covered. Remember, our Chapter 5 exercise is due tonight. All right, we're going to be covering Chapters 9, 10, and possibly 11 in class. In the next week or so, I'm going to post an online lecture for Chapters 7 and 8, and you will have a brief online quiz to take for that. Open book, open notes, boost your test grade. On the last week of class, we're going to do our collective bargaining exercise. We'll pick teams before Thanksgiving, but we're going to do preparation for that on the 2nd. And then on the 4th and the 6th, the last 2 days of class, we're going to have a collective bargaining exercise in class. And here it is, guys. Your final exam will be online during our scheduled final time. Yeah, thank you. Guys, today, if you hadn't heard, today is National Act of Kindness Day. That is my act of kindness toward you to make that happen for you guys. Make your commitment to me, though, guys, that during that time, because I have to hold it during the scheduled time, that you will be online and take the test during that time. I'll be opening it at the 8 o'clock section. I'll be closing it at 10. So you're going to have that 2-hour window to get it done. Please don't make me give you a 0 on that test. Be online at that time. We good? Yes.
What's the date?
The date is the last day of finals. The 13th, Friday the 13th, I believe. How cryptic. But that'll be the time that we're doing it. So are we all good on that? Yeah. Any questions, guys? All right. Is this fair? Awesome. All right, guys. Let's continue. What we're going to start off today with is a review of Chapter 6. This is a substantial review because what we talked about in Chapter 6 is tying directly into our collective bargaining exercise. So please participate. Please give me your opinion. And if a question is not clear, please hit me up. A continuing interdependent relationship that involves the exchange of commitments to resolve conflicts of interest by reaching agreements acceptable to both labor and management is that contract bargaining, collective bargaining, illegal bargaining, or mandatory bargaining. It is collective bargaining, indeed. True or false? Attempting to extend a lead contract from one employer to others is called pattern bargaining.
True.
It is true. Which company was recently subjected to pattern bargaining? Was it Fiat Chrysler, Toyota, Ford, or Subaru? It was actually B, or it was actually C. It was Ford, because remember, who was the first company that GM the United Auto Workers were starting off with GM, and you notice how long did that strike go with GM and the United Auto Workers? How long? About a month. Did Ford ever have a strike? No, because they already knew what the pattern was going to be. They engaged in pattern bargaining. Which of the following is the name for the union in contract negotiation? Is it bargaining unit, negotiating unit, contract unit, or control unit? Think about what we covered in the chapter. It is the bargaining unit, correct. When an organization tries to use a recent contract to gain leverage in negotiation, is it called an unfair labor practice, a lock-in agreement, a no-fault contract, or leapfrogging? D. It is D. It is leapfrogging. All right, what strategy is an employer using when they try to use terms of an agreement with another union? Is it leapfrogging, unfair labor practice, whipsaw, or chainsaw? It is whipsaw. That's like, again, that would be the most kick-ass weapon in a video game if you had a whipsaw, like a chainsaw on the end of a whip that you could hit people with. That would be like an amazing video game. What is the highest number of team members for an ideal negotiating team? The highest threshold for the ideal setting. It's not A, it is B, it's 9. All right, the area between employer and employee wants where there is room to negotiate. Is that called the bargaining agreement range, wiggle room, resistance point, or target? It is bargaining agreement range. If you hit, the resistance point is what you hit when you're getting into the range. You remember we did the illustration where we had labor and management. They hit their resistance point in the middle is the bargaining agreement range. Remember that range. True or false? Public employees cannot be forced to pay union dues. It is true. And it was based on a decision we're going to talk about in a minute, and that's recent case law. The Supreme Court decision which concluded the public employees could not be forced to pay union dues, what decision was that? Was that the Willis decision, the Abner decision, the Stolfus decision, or the Janus decision? Say it real loud. D. Here's a little inside joke. My dog's name is Willis Abner Stolfus Tonka, so that's where those names came from. So I thought it was funny. True or false? General costing proposals include employee background data, per hour wages and increases, and the effects of these aspects on proposed contract revisions. Is that true or false? Don't overthink it. True. It is true. All right. Bargaining in which one party loses something so that another party can gain something. Is that called integrated bargaining, distributed bargaining, whipsaw bargaining, or bad faith bargaining? B. It is B. Do you know what? There's an alternative term for it too. Do you know what it is? It's when lose bargaining. So in other words, tit for tat. All right. What's another name for integrative bargaining? Is that distributed bargaining, win-lose bargaining, win-win bargaining, or homeopathic bargaining? Any guesses? It is C. Yeah, homeopathic bargaining. It sounds like we all went to like a massage therapy place, got some essential oils, breathed in some incense, and said we're all going to be right with the universe. That's homeopathic bargaining. So when a bargaining unit breaks into smaller groups for more effective conversations, do we call it a caucus, a committee, a working group, or a nimble negotiating group? What do you think? Take a guess. No electric shocks will be administered during this day. A. A is correct. You go to caucus with somebody, for example. True or false? Chamberlain and Kuhn's concept of bargaining power equals a party's power is equal to the other party's cost of disagreement divided by their cost of agreement to the first party's terms. Don't overthink this one either, guys. True. It is true. Thank you. So, true or false? A strong economy can both help and hurt a union's bargaining power. That is true. Absolutely true. Will somebody tell me why? How can a strong economy do both? Yes.
Lower unemployment means there's less people looking for jobs, which means shoot.
You were keep going.
I had my train of thought. I just completely lost it.
Anybody want to tag in with Ryan, help him out here? Because he had a really good thought.
You have more people employed, which which can lead to, you know, greater opportunity for job switching and stuff. And therefore, because you have all this job mobility, you don't have like the union having a complete stranglehold on, you know, this complete company. You can have people coming in and out.
Exactly right. So the union loses some power in the fact we've got a good economy. How can a good economy be good for unions too? Yes?
I think GM strike, they said that they kind of weathered the storm whenever the recession hit with GM. So now that the economy's good, they kind of ask for more.
Exactly right. You've got economic leverage too. So if you're General Motors and all of a sudden you went from the verge of bankruptcy to being a very profitable company with a high stock price, all of a sudden the union is saying, well, we've got some leverage now too because we can bring you down if you don't help us out with where we are as well. All right, here's another open-ended question. What's the difference in how public and private unions can justify pay raises, i.e., how will the employers raise cash? If we've got a public union, somebody who's based with public employees, and the union wants more money, how can the company, in this case the government, raise additional cash?
Raise taxes.
Exactly right. So we've got, let's get an answer from this side of the room. If we've got a private company and the union wants more money, how can the company produce more money? They can raise prices. So in other words, that GM pickup that was $45,000, maybe it's going to be $52,000 next year, so we can pay for those increases. Very good, guys. You guys are nailing this. Here's another open-ended one. What's the danger of bluffing during negotiations? Or in life in general, for that matter. What's the danger of bluffing? Why is it a bad idea to bluff somebody? Yes?
You get called on it, you really don't have any more leeway.
Yeah, as the old expression goes, if your mouth is writing checks your ass can't catch, you're in a bad spot. And that's why bluffing is a bad thing to do. So if somebody calls you on your bluff, you better be able to put up or shut up. All right, when deciding on a party's behavior during bargaining, the National Labor Relations Board, what will they explore? Is it intent, behavior, ethics, or totality of conduct? The term we talked about in the last two classes. What do you think, guys? Take a guess.
D?
D is correct. They're looking at your overall behavior. Think of this as the analogy. Most classes that you will take, for example, aren't going to grade you just on a test or just on your class experience or just on your homework. They're going to look at all of it together, your totality of performance. We're looking at your totality of conduct. In other words, yes, we might have had some slip-ups if we're the employer of the union where maybe we weren't as nice as we could have been, but overall, were we reasonable? Yeah, we were reasonable, meaning if the NLRB is coming down to things like arbitration, like we're going to be talking about today, they're going to consider all that stuff in the equation. Which of the following is an illegal subject for collective bargaining? Is it closed shop, wages, working conditions, or benefits? Which is an illegal subject? We're splitting hairs on a term here, too, by the way. Any guesses? It is A. Now, you remember the term closed shop still gets thrown around a lot. What is the actual technical term? Union shop. So the difference between closed shop and union shop. In the old days, a closed shop meant you could ask people to join the union before they had a job. That's illegal. You can't do that, and you can't put it into a collective bargaining agreement, although sometimes people try. Sometimes they try because they're misinformed, for example. So it is definitely A. True or false? A subject that affects hours, working conditions, or terms of employment is called a permissive subject. What do you think? Is that true or false? It's actually incorrect because it is a mandatory subject. That's splitting hairs on a term. That's why we're covering this stuff, guys. Which of the following is not a management per se unfair labor practice? Refusing to meet with the union, making a wage change without talking to the union, reaching an impasse on a non-mandatory issue, or disagreeing on wage scales. Which is not a per se unfair labor practice? I'm going to start using per se more often. I like that. Yeah, I'm not teaching a class poorly per se. So what do you think? Well, Emily 1 or Emily 2? Which one? What do you think? Because we have 2 Emilys in here. You guys could team up on this answer. We usually have 3 Emilys. We only have 2 Emilys today. So which one do you think? Take a guess. It's okay not to know. That's how we learn. That's not the right answer per se. Try again.
Emily?
Yeah, Emily 2. We know it's not B.
What'd you say?
We know it's not B.
I thought she said D.
I thought you said B. Did you say B or D?
Is D right?
D. D is the right answer. That's right.
I was also going to guess D.
Well, then not per se. Actually, in fact, you had the right answer. So I love that. It's like there's certain words, like there's certain ways we can get to be rude. Like I love the phrase "I'm just saying." You can use that for anything. Like that guy looks like absolute shit. I'm just saying. You know, like that exonerates you from any kind of rudeness. You know, this food tastes terrible. I'm just saying. As my wife slaps me in the face, and she's like, "I want a divorce. I'm just saying." You know, so yeah, and the Southerners though, bless their heart. That's the best one. I love that one. Guys. Bless their heart. That guy should burn in hell. Bless his heart. I love that. I love it. All right, true or false? In addition to being illegal, a union insisting on a closed shop would also be a per se unfair labor practice. Is that true or false?
True.
That is true, absolutely. And it's not per se, it is. All right, refusal to consider any contract modification. Is that Bowlerism, Tonkinism, Taftism, or anachronism? It's Tonkinism, yeah. Tonkinism is rambling for no apparent reason at the beginning of class. No, it's not B. It's a good guess. It is A. Like, what would Tonkinism be? If I was creating a philosophy based around the way I talk to people, what would it be? I think probably random insertion of things that just don't matter at all. Probably. Random karate moves. I've done that in class. I taught my 201 class how to break a man's skull with her fist. And anybody in this room can do that. I did, absolutely. I bet either...
Western PA accent?
Oh, I haven't done the Western PA accent. Maybe I'll do that today. That could happen. Yeah, what you guys think about this there and that? We're going to talk about this study guide over there. It's getting slippery out there and that, so we're getting ready for finals. Want to make sure you're ready for this test? Yeah, buddy. Something like that? Is that what I'm talking about? Yeah. You guys better get up there and rent up that room and that, or there's going to be trouble. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, buddy. So, true or false, going through the motion with no intention of reaching an agreement is a dilatory tactic. Is that true or false? This is a tricky one. Who said false? Because you're absolutely correct. It's surface bargaining. If you're using a dilatory tactic, what are you trying to do? You're delaying, because if you dilatory sounds like dilly-dally, it's a delaying tactic. Exactly. Well done. Oh, I guess I gave you the answer to this one. True or false, discretionary freedom to decide about how a company should be run equals management rights, and that's absolutely true. What happened to my animation here? Wow, I'm giving you guys the answers. We'll cover it anyway because I'll fix it for your review. True or false, when a company is purchased by another firm, the union collective bargaining agreement is automatically null and void, regardless of the similarity of the business. That is false. I'm going to make sure my next animation works so that you guys actually get it. All right, we're good to go on this one. All of the following play a role in deciding if an existing contract bargaining agreement must be honored by a new owner, except what? Is a percentage of union employees retained, change in products produced, change in production processes, or owner bias? Which one does not play a role in deciding if the existing union contract will stay? We covered this very quickly in class the other day. Take a guess. Which one of those really can't affect whether or not a union stays? It's not B. It is D. Owner bias. And here's the reason by it. If we, let's say for example, we're Fiat Chrysler, and we sell our car plant to a new owner who makes cars. Well, if we're keeping most of the staff, we're keeping a high percentage of union employees, we're not changing the products we're making, and we're not changing the production process, we probably still have to honor the collective bargaining agreement. Just because we don't like it is not a reason to get rid of it. Now, if we used to be a car plant and all of a sudden we're going to start making kitchenware, for example, if we're changing everything, we have an argument to say this isn't the same company and we're barely keeping anybody. That would be your argument. All right. Oh, what's going on with my true or false? Clause in the labor contract requiring the present owners to obligate subsequent owners to continue the labor contract upon assumption of ownership is called a good faith clause. No, it's called a successorship clause. All right. The blank decision provided protections for bankrupt firms to modify a collective bargaining agreement. Is it the Bildisco, Hostess, Wazansky, or Hartley? Say it again. So what is it? It is A. How did you figure that out, by the way?
Hostess, I just thought of the little snacks.
Yep.
Hartley and Tab. And it was between A and C.
And Wazansky, I was thinking of Mike Wazansky from Monsters, Inc.
Yeah.
But that's like the most random name for a character ever. What do we got? We got Sully, we got all these monster names, and Mike Wazansky. Like, how did that happen in a Disney movie? I don't get it. And but the reason I put Hostess there, do you guys remember I've mentioned them a couple of times? We haven't done a case study of them, but why is Hostess important for us to talk about? Yes?
Didn't they have to shut down or get bought out because the union made it too much?
The union was asking so much of the employer in this case that the employer could not financially maintain operations and give the union what they wanted, so they went out of business and got bought up by somebody else. I don't know what happened with all my true and false today, guys. I'm sorry. If a company terminates organized employees during negotiations without cause, such actions can result in both reinstatement and back pay. That is true. So, guys, that is our Chapter 6 review. Before we get into Chapter 9 today, guys, questions or comments? Can I get a question or comment from each side of the room? I'm gonna request that today because I gave you guys the kindness of an online final that you don't have to be here for. Will you give me the kindness of a question or comment from each side of the room? Yes.
Is it hard to get the online final, or is it relatively easy?
It was one of these things. In terms of the test going to be hard, you mean?
No, I mean in terms of going to your management.
I did a little negotiation, and worked out some things. So yeah, it wasn't impossible, but I had to do a couple of things, and we got it done. Yep. Give and take. That's what you do. Can I get it? Well, yeah, you your hand up as well.
Do you ever have just like one of those weeks where like just something that usually isn't that major, it's just the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Oh yeah, I've had one of those weeks.
I've had so many papers to write, and then all of a sudden my desktop computer just shuts off. Can't get it back on. Well, it can boot, but it doesn't load Windows, so I'm pretty sure it's a RAM issue.
Yep.
I don't want to spend the money on a new one because I don't have the money, and it's just
Sometimes you get to that point in your life where it just becomes almost like it's raining anvils, and it's like you look up and it's raining and anvils are falling out of the sky. This was like 3 summers ago. Is anybody here allergic to poison ivy? Like severely allergic? If I even get exposed to it, if I get close to it and breathe it or gets anywhere near me, I have an allergic reaction. So the same summer I found out that my beloved uncle was dying of cancer, I got a case of poison ivy that was so bad I had welts this big on my abdomen, and I had to take prednisone to deal with the poison ivy. And here's the effect that prednisone has: it makes you stay up all night and gain weight. So you can get fat while you're fighting with poison ivy and not be able to sleep at the same time. It was like the worst summer ever. That's when I felt the straw broke the camel's back. Yes.
I got poison ivy right before my cousin's wedding, and I had to lose weight to get into the dress.
Oh my God.
So I was not eating and taking prednisone, so it was awful.
And you weren't sleeping probably.
Not sleeping.
Yeah.
It was bad.
The only good news about prednisone is if you want to go running, you got all the energy in the world. You just can't sleep at all. So one more question. Question or comment from this side of the room before we get in. What would you guys like to ask? Yes, Corey.
Hypothetically speaking, if like a non-government gave like $2 million to St. Francis, how would you want them to use it?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think what I would probably do, I would put my own biases aside, and I would ask the students to vote. I would say, okay, guys, we have $10 million, We can improve anything around here you guys think needs to be improved. Where do you think the money should be spent? It's your school. I think you guys should get to make that decision. If I were doing it myself, I probably would look at some of the teams we have that don't have their own facilities. Like we don't have a tennis court here, for example. I think it'd be awesome to have that. I think it'd be awesome if we had more places like the new dining hall in Frankie's for students. I'd want to take part of that and turn it into student aid. So if we have folks who are really good students and are having a hard time affording the tuition, we can help with that too. What about you? If you had $10 million to spend, where would you put it?
I would probably put like $5 million towards non-essentials, like you said. And probably like another $5 million to like update like the living, like the dorms.
That's a good point too. Put air conditioning everywhere. Yeah, I like that idea. So, all right, guys. Any other points before we jump into some new material for the day? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys being with me today and on this. What we're going to be talking about in the next chapter, we're going to basically be talking about things like arbitration, how we manage labor impasses. We talked in the last chapter, chapter 6, about how collective bargaining actually works. Chapters 7 and 8 really get into economic conditions and how unions, for example, if they get benefits, if they get raises, how they're going to spend them, how they're going to set up things like pay scales. For example, in a union shop, how do we generally get promotions? It's not generally necessarily performance evaluation, it is seniority. So that's what chapters 7 and 8 are going to talk about. And it's not to say those things aren't important. They are important. But that's stuff that is more linear, that's easy to present. This stuff takes some discussion. When we get into a collective bargaining agreement and we get to a point where we can no longer negotiate, when we have hit an impasse, it means that people are done talking. We cannot come to a conclusion about this. In a marriage, it says, hey, maybe we're heading for divorce. In a company and employee relationship, that's not generally an option. So that means the National Labor Relations Board has to come up with a way to resolve it. And that's when we get into the idea of mediation and arbitration. Mediation simply means you have somebody who is impartial, who's going to come into the middle of this argument and try to figure out who's right and who's wrong. I'm going to show a brief video about what mediators actually do. Do you guys remember from earlier in the semester, what's the difference between mediation and arbitration? Anybody remember? Yes?
Mediation, you have a third party kind of facilitating the discussion, whereas in arbitration, the third party makes the final decision.
Exactly right. So let's say, for example, Ryan and Jared are having a dispute. If I'm mediating and I'm trying to get these guys to talk to each other and to make some concessions, if I'm arbitrating, I'm investigating, and I'm making the final decision who's getting what. So that's the difference between those two. So let's take a little look. I think this video gives a nice summary. Come to consensus, for example, can make for a really good mediator or arbitrator. So if you've ever been that person in your group of friends who's able to get people to come together, you could have a job there. Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service is essentially paid for by your tax dollars. And this group will provide mediators and arbitrators who will come in and deal with labor disputes. Here's why this is something you guys should also be thinking about in your day jobs as well. There's a new movement with employers to basically require everybody who comes to employment to sign what they refer to as an arbitration clause. And what that means, guys, is that you are signing away your rights to be able to sue your employer. A lot of companies are doing this now, basically saying, if you want to work for us, you got to sign this arbitration clause. If you have a disagreement with us on anything legal, pretty much, you have to go to arbitration, and you can't hire a lawyer. You cannot take this to court. Why is that something you guys should be concerned about? If somebody's trying to make you sign something that requires arbitration as opposed to taking something to court, why should you be concerned about that? Yes?
I mean, it takes away your power. Like, if you have to go to arbitration, then they're probably going to select the arbitrator. It just puts a lot of power in their hands and just takes it away from you.
It really does. And why are employers so interested in forcing arbitration as opposed to open lawsuits? What advantage do employers have in this scenario? Thoughts? Yes?
Usually it's cheaper.
Yeah, they're looking to control costs. If you are an employer, and you've got two scenarios. One is we've got required arbitration where we're going to have to get together and talk about this. Doesn't mean you won't have a lawyer as an employee, but you're also going to be forced to go to arbitration outside of a court as opposed to taking it to a court. It's going to be cheaper for the employer, and it's going to be more controllable. And chances are, arbitration, what generally happens there as opposed to a court can award massive settlements, massive damages. Arbitration tends to be a splitting the difference kind of deal. Generally speaking, if you go to court, you're going to see higher amounts of damages if you win than if you go to arbitration. That makes sense, guys? Okay. But that is something you should be concerned about, and a lot of employers are requiring this now. I think we're going to see some new law come into place in terms of, it all depends. Like right now, for example, our current administration, again, no judgment on who you voted for, our current administration is tend to be more pro-employee or more pro-company. It's definitely a pro-company administration. Now we're seeing a lot of economic benefit from that. There's no two ways about it. Our economy is doing well. But that being said, the employee doesn't necessarily find themselves in a more powerful position. If the next president or the next administration has a bias more toward employees, for example, some of these laws may be overturned, like required arbitration. Okay, so let's say, for example, we have an impasse. The first thing that an arbitrator or a mediator is going to do is try to find the facts. They're going to do an investigation. So again, going back to Ryan and Jared, because these two are so angry at each other, it's very difficult to get completely honest answers. Well, right now we've got folks over here who work for the company, and so Jared works for the administration, and we've got Ryan who's a member of the labor union, and we're going to be talking to assorted people around these two to find out how this thing actually came to the place where we are. People in the committee, we're going to be talking to them. We're also going to be talking to the rank and file. Things we might want to find out, for example, have there been unfair labor practices? Has the company been excessively aggressive in terms of enforcing an anti-union agenda, for example? And so if we get into something called interest arbitration, that means that we have somebody who's going to come in and listen to both sides, and they're going to make a binding decision. And again, that's what arbitration is. Binding arbitration also is one of these things. By the time you're done with that agreement, what you have is what you have. There's no appealing it, generally speaking. So some of the things that sometimes get debated, for example, some of the things that get investigated. For example, right now, if we have an employer who is trying to enforce ridiculously low wages, are they in an unfair labor practice simply because they're taking advantage of people? Are the working conditions excessively bad? Does the employer really have the financial inability to pay what the workers are asking for? For example, in the hostess example, if we investigate that employer and it turns out they're rolling in money and they're putting on the poor face to the employees, that's bargaining in bad faith. It's not going to play well with an arbitrator. And we're also going to look at things like the general welfare and interests of the public. We talked a little bit about Massey Mine, for example. Do you guys remember Upper Big Branch Massey Mines? What happened? Anybody remember? Yes. Yeah, they were having problems with getting methane gas out of the mines, and they still kept sending people in. Well, if safety had been an issue in the debate between the union and the company, for example, an arbitrator or a mediator would be looking to say what safety conditions actually existed. Did the union have a legitimate complaint here because they were operating in an unsafe area, for example? So in terms of interest arbitration, in the conventional interest arbitration, we have the arbitrator who's coming in and looking at both sides. What are you coming from? Where are you coming from? What are you asking for? What do we see as reasonable on both sides of this argument? At that point, when you're in arbitration, we get to what we refer to as the final offer total package. And what that means is both sides come back to the table and basically say, this is what we're willing to give. This is where we are willing to bend a little bit. And at that point, the arbitrator can pick one side or another. Or you can go one issue at a time. We can go tit for tat. On wages, the union wins. On benefits, the company wins. So you can either go with a final offer total package where you put it all together in one big lump, one big contract, or you can do it one issue at a time. They both have their merits. I mean, on one hand, if you go for the final offer total package, from a bargaining perspective, you're looking at the totality of benefit. Let me give you an example why that's a good way to look at things. We're getting into HR a little bit here, so bear with me. Guys, for anybody who is either in my HR class or has had an HR class, if a person makes $100,000 a year, by the time they integrate their benefits, what is the company actually paying that person? Yes. About 130. Very good. So when we tie in the other things, we call it total compensation. If we're looking at these kinds of bargaining situations, by looking as a whole, what is the union getting? What is the company getting out of that? That can be a very, borrowing from a term I used earlier today, that can be a very homeopathic way of looking at things. It means we're looking at everything combined. If we're going one issue at a time, sometimes we can get lost in the weeds. If we get so obsessed with the idea of a 50-cent per hour pay raise that we're not really talking about whether or not our benefits are staying the same. Look at it this way, guys, with the cost of healthcare. And I'm going somewhere with this, so bear with me. With the cost of healthcare, if our healthcare costs are going up by 20%, and we're giving the company that, we're allowing the company to raise our healthcare by 20% on the employees, but they're giving us a 50-cent per hour raise. Are we really making out on the deal? Potentially not. You got to look at what the better option is, and that's why combining everything into a final offer total package is sometimes better than one line at a time bargaining. You get where I'm going, guys? Okay. All right, guys, in terms of some of the criticisms of this approach, using interest arbitration, again, as I said before, generally speaking, when we get down to arbitration, we generally have the idea of splitting the difference, more or less. Most arbitrators are going to come in and try to be as fair as they can to everybody, even if there's been an unfair labor practice happening. Sometimes that gets lost in the conversation. And we also have the idea, guys, let's think about this for a second. How many of you ever, I don't know if any of you have, how many of you ever met my wife? Yeah, she's a sweet lady, isn't she? Yeah, wonderful human being. Well, let's say, for example, she and I had a wonderful marriage, but we got to this point where all of a sudden we couldn't talk to each other anymore, to the point where we got to get a counselor involved or a mediator, if we're getting into divorce territory, to actually help us talk to each other. If we get to that point, is our relationship ever going to be the same? Not right away anyway. We have that chilling effect where all of a sudden you're realizing that person you care about, you can't really have a direct conversation with anymore. We see it in rock and roll bands when they have to bring their lawyers to the table to talk about how they're going to go on to the tour. We see it in companies when all of a sudden the union and the management side of things cannot get it together anymore. So all of a sudden we're going to be relying on outsiders to help us talk to each other. It's what we call the chilling effect. And it also means that sometimes if we come to rely on arbitration, we don't know how to get along without it. Questions, guys? Questions or comments? Well, in the interest of Kindness Day, I'm going to let you guys out 10 minutes early. If you agreed to do something for me, will you guys all make a commitment to do something nice for somebody today, just because? If you guys can make that commitment to me, to pass on some good vibes to somebody else, I'm going to let you go 10 minutes early. Can you guys commit to that?
Sure.
All right, before you go, what time? When's our test?
Wednesday.
Okay, our test is next Wednesday. How are we doing our final? At the time when it is scheduled. Guys, study, I'll send you the study guide. I need to see a couple of you just for some unrelated class stuff. So Rashawn and Kenny, if you guys can hang out for a minute, because I have two things for you guys. Guys, have a wonderful day.